Can the betrayer experience getting gaslit?
Welcome to the Therapy Brothers podcast.
I'm Brannon.
I'm Tyler.
We're brothers.
We're therapists.
And we know recovery.
Bring your stories, your questions, your successes with real recovery.
Hey, Tyler, you ready to have some hard conversations?
Let's do it.
Let the Therapy Brothers podcast begin.
Brandon, how's it going today, man?
That's going well. Yeah, things are good. Like always. I feel like I always say good, and I tell my clients not to say good. So I'll identify an emotion. I'm feeling happy and content.
All right. I hope that you experience that more often than not.
Will you check in now with your emotions?
I think overall, the overall portion of life is happy and content, but also today I've been without my wife for almost a week now. She's been helping a sister in Florida who just had some surgery, and so it's funny. Like when Rhiannon leaves town, there's like 2 or 3 days that I actually kind of enjoy it, where I'm like, okay, I can be productive at work without feeling guilty. I can go and maybe hit the river for a little longer than maybe I normally would and fly fish for a while. But then by like day 3, I feel like I'm just like, I feel like I'm just like waiting for her to get home. Like, man, when's she going to come home? I miss her, Yeah. So that's where I'm at this morning. She's flying back tomorrow. So I'm kind of in that mode of just like, I miss my wife.
Oh man, look at the love. It's just madly in love still after all these years.
I've never been much of a romantic, but I do miss my wife.
Yeah, so, I love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, Tyler, let's dive into the topic here. I think just from the initial kind of question, it could be kind of triggering and interesting. So I want to give a little bit of like context and background to this. Before we dive into some of the dynamics that I'm seeing, I think it would be helpful if we understood or talked about what gaslighting is.
Yeah, let's talk about gaslighting a little bit first in general terms, and then we'll kind of get into the topic you wanted to talk about for a minute.
Gaslighting is so trendy right now. It's like the new word of the day. It's everywhere. It's all over social media. And I think half the time people don't really understand it.
Yeah.
So what is it, Tyler?
So a couple of things. I'm going to share a couple of things. The term is actually based off of an old film called Gaslight. And the story is a husband who slowly changes the level of lighting inside their house, the gas lights at the time, it's a play, in order to make her go crazy so that he can then end up with the money, basically. So he makes her feel crazy because he keeps changing the lights, but then tells her that the lights haven't changed.
So she's like, the lights are changing. The lights are changing. What lights?
Yeah.
Huh?
So that's why it's called gaslighting. And then the definition is it's a form of psychological manipulation in which the abuser attempts to sow self-doubt and confusion in their spouse's mind. Typically, gaslighters are seen seeking to gain power and control over the other person by distorting reality and forcing them to question their own judgment or their own intuition.
Okay. Yeah. So okay, on to my question here, because what I'm basically saying is, can the person struggling with addiction get gaslit? And I this has been coming up a lot lately. Let me share a couple stories with you.
Before you do that, Brandon, I just want to maybe say this, that the term gaslighting actually is legitimate and it happens a lot. And a lot of times the way that it gets used in the addiction world is from the addict trying to protect their secrets and their shame and their lying and their hiding.
By making their spouse feel crazy.
By making their spouse feel crazy. Usually the addict is actually trying to protect themselves. They're not necessarily trying to make the person go crazy. They're just but their self-preservation makes the other person feel crazy. And that's why it's called gaslighting. Sometimes it's on purpose. Right. And so
sometimes it's unconscious though, too. Like someone can gaslight somebody and not even realize they're doing it, but they're doing it.
But they're doing it to protect themselves more than they are with malice towards the other person. But the end effect is I feel crazy. I don't trust my own intuition anymore. I don't know if I can trust my own judgment anymore. I was told this, but then I was this. And like, I just had an example of one recently that like the traditional form of it would be, you know, I'm a highly religious person. I've got my own addiction. I'm acting out back here. Something feels off in the relationship, but then I use my like highly religious, maybe position even in the church that I'm in to then tell my partner, nothing's wrong. You must be crazy. Like maybe you need to go see a therapist about that because nothing's wrong here. Meanwhile, I'm disconnected, checked out, got my own secret addiction going on. That's the typical way that it gets used. And that's legitimate. Like it causes a lot of problems inside of a relationship. And so today's episode isn't to discount that side of it at all. Like, no, it's like, it's actually, let's talk about gaslighting itself as it relates across all relationship here, because it also sometimes works the opposite direction and it doesn't help the overall outcome that either partner is really looking for.
Exactly. So what you just said is really important to understand as we dive into this. So the reason why I want to talk about it is because it doesn't yield the results that anybody's looking for. And I actually think that people are gaslit by their therapists. They're gaslit by their spouses. They're gaslit by their church leaders, and whole systems can gaslight. And this is how this has come up for me, Tyler. I've been listening to some past episodes and thinking of some past clients and things like that. We work with a lot of weak men. We do, Tyler. We work with a lot of men, and men who are good men, but men who do not know who they are.
Yeah, I think that's they're not assured of who they are yet.
Yeah. They have strength inside of them. We know that. They have goodness. They have all those things, but they don't show up that way. They show up weak. They don't know who they are. They're turning to something to give them that answer of, tell me I'm okay, tell me I'm good enough, and tell me who I am. Help me know who I am. So I'm listening to some past episodes and things like that, and I'm hearing these men swirling around, having gone to therapy, listening to their spouses and being told exactly who they are. You know, they're being told by BTR, they're being told by other therapists, Doug Weiss, and then the wife comes along and says, "Yep, that's what you are." So I got a phone call. I brought this up on an episode recently. I got a phone call from a guy who was so humble and wanting to self-reflect and wanting to take accountability for all of the mess in his relationship, in his life. And in a genuine, sincere way said, you know, if I just wasn't a narcissist, then like I could fix this a lot better. And if my narcissistic ways didn't cause all this mess. And Tyler, there's an oxymoron in these statements that he's making.
Yeah.
Do you see the oxymoron?
He's showing up as anything except a narcissist by owning the fact that he's a narcissist.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, like I was listening to Joel on our episode today, and he's saying, I'm an intimacy anorexic. That I'm going to a group and that's what we're studying. And I go to a Doug Weiss thing and that's what I am. And that's what I am. And maybe he is. Maybe he is.
You don't know. We only got one call with him, but
maybe he is.
He didn't come across in the ways that he was painting himself. That's what you're saying.
He was emotional the whole episode, and he was crying and open. And now I don't know what he's like with his spouse.
Yeah. Right.
But the point being, like, is that being beaten into his head of you're this, you're a narcissist, you're an intimacy anorexic, you're an addict, you're a this, you're a that, and with a guy who is trying to find answers of what he is. And a lot of times it's these Mr. Nice guys who are trying to be compliant. Let me do the right things. And so they go to these professionals, or they listen to their spouse who says, well, you're this and you need to fix that. And then they just drink that in and think that's exactly what they are. In a way, I kind of see that like a gaslight. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, but because what it does is it causes them to actually question again,
who am I?
who they are, their own intuitions, their own, and it's actually taking them in some of these cases. And what you're saying, Brandon, this is what's hard about this, is that in some of these cases, that's actually taking them further away from the truth of who they are and who they're trying to become.
Right. So like, if you don't identify what it actually is, but so take like BTR, who says every man that's ever looked at porn is an abuser, right? And so you take a really weak man whose wife is going to BTR, and betrayal trauma recovery. I don't want to promote it too much, but they're going to BTR and he's a really weak man. And what they say is, you're an abuser, you're an abuser, you're an abuser. And that's all you are, is an abuser. If he has no idea who he is, he's going to think, oh, that's what I am. That's all I am. Like, I'm just an abuser. And then they're empowering the wife to say, your abusive husband is the problem. It drives the shame home. He doesn't know who he is. Now, if he's an actual abuser, that's an issue that needs to get dealt with. If he's not an actual abuser and this is happening, he's getting gaslit. The systems are gaslighting him. It's not helping the spouse in the long run. It's not helping him in the long run.
It's not helping the marriage in the long run.
It's not helping the marriage in the long run.
It's difficult to tease that stuff out though, Brannon. And part of the gaslighting part of it is like, and I think where you're speaking with so much passion right now is that you take a handful of men at any given time on your caseload, and you know them because you've gotten to know their full story. They worked with you for a really long time. They're coming in and they're repeating this stuff back to you like, I am an abuser. It's like they're defining themselves as the abuser.
I'm a narcissist. I'm an abuser. I'm an addict.
The definition of themselves as a result of these things that they're, quote, learning is working counterproductively to the thing that they want to be, that God designed them to be, and that their wives want. And so what you end up seeing is like, if a partner goes and says, your husband is an abuser, will always be an abuser, this and that and the other, they get frustrated why they can't figure out how to build intimacy in their relationship, even though their husband's been sober for the last 4 years. And he actually has gone through like the disclosure process 4 or 5 times and even sent letters of apology. And he's now actively working, and, all of that stuff. You never quite can get through the label itself.
Right.
And then the marriage falls apart because now she resents him for being a weak man.
Right.
Even though.
So all these other things are not seen, all the work that's actually happening, because the lens that is there is, he's a narcissist, or he's just the addict, or he's whatever, right?
Yeah, it's like, I'll just give like a really common little story that came from like a Brene Brown video. She's telling this story about how she got up in the morning. She had stayed up really late the night before because her husband was gone. She doesn't sleep well, to gone to water polo. She asked him to be home by 10. He got home at 10:30. She gets up in the morning and she spills her cup of coffee all over her clothes. And then he calls from work. He's like, hey, how you doing, babe? And she's like, I'll tell you what I'm doing. I'm cleaning up the coffee that you like it's his fault because she spilled her coffee, because she stayed up late, because he stayed at water polo too long. Like that's like a form of gaslighting.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's like,
but if he has no idea who he is in that moment, he'll be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I spilled that coffee on you.
I think that's actually that's what's so crazy about this process is that by nature, if I've been betrayed, that rocks my world. I mean, my head is spinning. I'm trying to figure out up from down. The emotional process that I go through hurts really deeply. And as a result, I try to find safety, and it becomes really easy and natural, because our bodies and brains are built to do this, to take this thing that my partner did and make it a target. And it's like, oh man, my pain is right there. But the target gets bigger. So now it's all of a sudden, well, if you didn't have your addiction, then I wouldn't feel this or this or this or this. Well, now because I feel this and this and this and this, it always boils back down to your addiction. And without meaning to, I think sometimes it actually fuels the wrong message towards the overall outcome that we want to actually be building.
Yeah. But it's, you know what I see, Tyler, like really create this confirmation bias is is well, what I see create the gaslighting is confirmation bias. So like if let's say I get caught with looking at porn and masturbating or whatever. And so I, go to Google, and my wife goes to Google because I'm not going to be very, very motivated, and I'm bumping along and I just got to fix it because I don't know who I am. She goes to Google, reads some reviews, and ends up at this place that treats sex addiction and intimacy anorexia. Okay. So we just end up there because it was like highest on Google and it had some good reviews. So I go into a session or two, and now all of a sudden I'm being diagnosed with intimacy anorexia because this place treats intimacy anorexia, right? Yeah. And there's but my whole case, if you conceptualize it, maybe I have a lot of parts of me that are not intimacy anorexic at all, right? But then there's evidence here. I can pick out this little thing that I did and that little thing that I did. And the confirmation bias starts to drive home. See, look, you have intimacy anorexia. And then the spouse is told, this is why you're so miserable, because he's struggling with intimacy anorexia. And I'm like, do you see it?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just because we ended up at that place. Now I'm an intimacy anorexic that, and it's in like treating sex addiction. You go to a place that specializes in sex addiction, Tyler, working in a very religious culture, I've had guys come in because they want a sex addiction group because they masturbate once a year.
Right.
And in many cases, a sex addiction treatment facility would take that and say, yeah, let's get you in a group because you're an addict. That's a problem. That's a problem because here I am coming in not knowing what I am. I'm looking to professional help, and then my spouse and my therapist and my church leader are all saying that's what you are. So then I'm like, I guess that's what I am.
It's the labeling. I think that's the issue, instead of the addressing of the whatever the underlying challenge or problem is, right? I remember having a guy who came to group, that exact same thing. He averaged about masturbating about once a year-ish, sometimes longer, but he himself felt so like it was still such a problem for him because it felt like he still didn't have control over himself, and he still felt a ton of like shame and things too that he was working on. Like, if he goes to a group, that's great. It's the labeling him as an addict that's not going to be productive, and it's actually gaslighting.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it's manipulating what's actually going on.
Yeah. Well, and I would say, what are the motivations for the gaslighting too? Like, that makes it gaslighting, right? So if I if I'm making this person feel crazy in order to benefit myself in some way that's not in their best interest, that's gaslighting. Whether that's to gratify my own pride, to gain some financial resource, to like, and so or to avoid taking accountability, like it's kind of like it's gaslighting. If I'm not having to take ownership for my experience or my choice or my part of the process. So, well, it's because you did this and this and this. It's because you're a sex addict that I did this. That's gaslighting. That's gaslighting. Instead of going, when you did that, I felt this and I chose to do this, and that's why I'm making my choice.
That's not gaslighting.
That's not gaslighting, right? So it's a lot of times gaslighting is an attempt to avoid accountability.
But which is really complex and hard with betrayal, because here I am having gotten betrayed, and it's painful and it's really hard. And so when I go into a therapist or a church leader and they say, your husband's a dirty, rotten scoundrel, like that's what he is, it validates that pain. And when it validates that pain, it helps me not have to look within to do my own healing work. Which sucks that you even have to do it because you got betrayed. But the fact of the matter is you do. So now I don't have to do my own work because I'm validated in that pain of what a dirty, rotten scoundrel he is. So let's keep driving home what a dirty, rotten scoundrel he is. And let's just beat that drum over and over and over again until he changes, and then everything will get better. And that is the gaslight.
That doesn't work.
It doesn't work, right?
It's reinforcing the beliefs that you're actually trying to climb out of all the
Yeah,
way
you
around. But it
exactly.
is difficult, Brandon, because like, let's just take the abuser thing for a second. Like, by definition, the things that we do, the things that I did to protect myself by misleading my wife could be defined as abusive,
Sure.
right? So I have behavior patterns that could be defined as abusive. If I'm labeled as an abuser, that's not going to help.
Unless you're actually an abuser, like that you do that
Well, and
consistently over time.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
I think that there's nuance to that too, right? Where if I on the other hand have some patterns, let's say I lead my wife off the trail a little bit here and there to avoid her seeing what I'm actually doing, and that's a pattern that I've had in my life. And then I come into recovery work and I start to work on things and I start practicing having some like lines of defense and building a team and starting to learn the skill of empathy, and there's some shifts happening. And then occasionally I end up doing the old behavior of like, hey, why'd it take you so long to get home tonight? Oh, I stopped along the way home to grab some hot lamp or something, but I don't tell her that. So I like mislead her again or throw her off the trail. Like,
Okay.
I'm back in my old behavior, even though my overall course of direction in life has been trending in the right direction. I've relapsed into that behavior. Does that make me defined as an abuser again, or did I do something abusive that I still need to take accountability for and I need to keep working on?
Okay.
Am I in the process of shifting patterns, or is it my identity?
Exactly. So like if the dude that masturbates once, is he an addict? Right?
No.
The person in a relationship that manipulates, are they an abuser? Because I would argue that everybody is an abuser because everybody has manipulated to some degree in their relationship. If that's the case, if that's what we're defining it as, then everybody's an abuser. And I think it's actually it's detrimental to do that, to label that as being an abuser, because then yeah.
unless
Because go ahead.
unless you're going to hold yourself to the same standard. Right?
Right.
It's like
Sure.
if my wife doesn't tell me that she went and spent an extra $100 today on something, and then I end
Right.
up finding the bag in the thing that I ask her about, she's like, no, I don't know how that got there. Like, you must be crazy. Like, she just gaslit me. And then I go like, you're an abuser. Then I better come home that same day when I go to get the hot lamp food and be like, hey
We're
babe,
back to the hot lamp.
I'm an abuser.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm an
like
abuser.
I
Like,
better hold myself to the same standard, which then every one of us listening to that right now cringes and goes like, no, like that's not going to be productive for anybody's relationship.
right. It's like
But I might
yeah,
confront that behavior in my wife the same way that I should confront it in myself and say, dang it, that does not help my relationship. That's not effective. It doesn't help my own overall sense of self. That's something I need to change. And I need to
right.
confront my wife the same way that I need to confront myself with it, which taking the label off and plugging in accountability is the better option.
Exactly. And exactly. Amen to that. Because the labels just create the whole gaslight, is especially if the person drinks it in. Like, yeah, you tell me that's what I am, so that's what I am. I'm just a lustful pervert addict, and that's all I am, right? And if a spouse is caught in her fear cycle and she's saying, how come you're looking at this and how come you're looking at that and you're just lustful and you're all those things. Now the truth is he might have some accountability, some work to do, to say, hey, I need to work on myself so that I can really be faithful to my wife. But all the labels and all the saying you're this, or we've defined you, it's definitive and that's what you are. We do this with addiction all the time. And you'll notice, Tyler, for me, I've really shifted to the person struggling with an addiction rather than the addict. Right. And back in the day, how many times have I heard, like, from therapists that train me and things, oh, he was in addict mode, addict this, addict that, addict. And it's like, stop. Let's just stop for a minute.
I
And
use those terms with the understanding of like, those are the parts of me that I'm working on.
sure, right? But I'm
Right.
talking about
The
back in the
label.
day where it was thrown at them all the time. And the truth is, like, let's take a step back and just say, like, he's a human who struggles with an addiction.
Yeah.
The guy that was getting accused and saying that he was a narcissist that I was talking about said that because he gets defensive sometimes with his emotions. And I'm thinking, like, I know him really well, and I know his wife really well, and she's defensive all the time around her emotions,
Yeah.
and it comes back to what you say, like, okay, if we're going to call it narcissism, then let's just do it across the board.
Let's find the most effective term to use for all of us, and then let's just use that term across the board.
Or don't label at all.
Which then means that the most effective thing to do in most cases is probably going to be, hey, let's take the labels off and let's learn how to dance with this differently.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
It doesn't mean I still don't hold boundaries. It doesn't still mean I don't have a voice around it, but let's do it in a way that's not taking me away from the place I want to be going in terms of effectiveness.
Yeah. Yep. I just, what do we want, Tyler? Like, for the betrayer and the betrayed, and the man and the woman, and what do we desire?
I think we obviously desire connection, safety, intimacy, and we also desire a life of, I would say, congruency.
Right. Are you on anyone's team? Are you on the man's team or the woman's team or the like,
it depends on which client you ask at what day, but but overall, at least the general place that I try to operate from, even though I know it doesn't feel that way to everybody all the time, is I want good health. I want good health. I want congruency from each individual so that there can be deeper intimacy in the relationship. That's what I want.
Yep. And it all comes down to truth, Tyler. Freedom and peace, happiness. It comes down
joy.
Yeah, it comes down to operating and acting in truth. And so, like, when a couple comes in and there's a lot of gaslighting going on one way or the other, or whatever it is, I'm not trying to fight against anybody. But the way that they heal is they actually start to operate from that place of truth. And sometimes we're so far gone from truth that you're spinning out in Neverland out there in the cosmos, wherever. It's like, let's just bring it back to simple things, to what's right in front of us. And I do, Tyler, I have a strong reaction to so-called experts or professionals who are making a lot of money off of labeling people and gaslighting people into convincing them they need a lot of therapy for things that they don't need therapy for. And colluding with spouses and partners and things like that in order to drive that home for a long time. I've worked in systems like that and gotten out of them. I see them crop up and come up all the time. And it drives me crazy because not only are people trusting them, they're paying them, and they're actually getting hurt by that, right? And so it drives me crazy a little bit, as you know.
Yeah, I know that that's something that's been pressing on you for a long time, and I would say that I don't think there's malice coming from any of these places you're talking about. Maybe
I do.
you
I
disagree
do.
with
Absolutely,
me on
there is malice.
that. Yeah. Not
There is tons of malice. Like, come on.
I think it goes
I know,
back to what we were
I know the
saying.
people who started these things personally, and they operate from malice, is where they operate.
Malice
Anyways,
malice towards whatever's going on in their own life, but I'm not towards like necessarily
but
they think they're helping.
They scale their vendetta is what they do. They
Yeah.
scale their revenge out, and then they act like experts and they hurt people with it.
Yeah,
And it drives me crazy.
yeah, I know that that's been something you've felt for a long time, and I'm glad we're able to talk about it
And
a
I've
little bit
watched
today.
it for a long time. And I've
You
dealt
know,
with clients who go through those programs and have to be totally like, you have to do therapy because of the therapy that they've had. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
So
yeah.
you're too nice, Tyler. You're always he's trying to rein me in.
But I'm just going back to what we said at the beginning, that, if I wasn't ever like purposely trying to damage and ruin my wife's life when I was gaslighting her. I was so stuck in self-preservation mode that was the byproduct, was that I did do those things to my wife and I hurt her
Right.
deeply, and I wish I could take those back, and I cringe just to think of all that. But it wasn't, I didn't wake up in the morning most days and go like, man, how can I stick it to her and make her feel so crazy? I think it was so self-centered that I didn't even have room for that.
I
And
agree.
you know
Okay, there might be some unconscious malice going on,
Yeah, or,
but
and maybe some self-malice, some self-hatred.
I don't think you were malicious though. Like what I'm saying is not all the time is there maliciousness going on behind the scenes for this gaslighting. I
No,
do think it's
I
a lot of it self-preservation. Sometimes it is that though.
sometimes it's to stick it to you or whatever, but I
Yeah.
also think the topic was going back towards the addict. I don't think a lot of times, like, say, a betrayed spouse is purposely, sometimes they are, but a lot of times they're in their own self-preservation, and it ends up being a form of gaslighting because it still removes self-accountability, self-introspection, humility, ownership for things, the truth. I think that's what you were
Right.
saying, is
Right.
is that if I'm making somebody else feel crazy in order to avoid the truth, that's gaslighting.
Or if I'm making someone else feel crazy in order to profit off of them going
Yeah,
forward,
that's
right?
gaslighting.
That's gaslighting. Um, Little side note, Tyler. There's a lot more good programs than there are bad ones. And I'm not just up here like, yeah, like, the therapy Utah is the only way. There's a lot of good people doing good therapy and really fighting hard in the trenches for truth and not gaslighting people. There's a lot of them out there. And I just want to acknowledge that. But
Yeah, well, maybe
yeah,
Brandon, how do you identify that stuff then? Because it all sure looks a lot the same. And I would say that you and I probably in our own brains classify ourselves as some of the good guys, you know?
I've been the bad guy. Not I've been a part of that unconscious gaslighting. And this is why I get so passionate about it, because I was trained to do it and I did it for a while and I watched destruction happen. And it's one of the things I feel the most guilt about in my life. I didn't realize that I was a part of it. And when I realized it, I got myself out of it. I stopped doing it. Um, and I've worked hard to get myself out of it. And to be honest with you, Tyler, I knew that I could profit off of doing it that way for a long time. I knew that. I knew that was right there for the taking. I could fill up group upon group and caseload upon caseload by gaslighting people into those programs. But I chose not to do it, and I continue to choose not to do it. And I'm continually checking myself, Tyler, of like, how am I operating in truth? Have I been deceived? Am I labeling people and pushing people in directions that I shouldn't? And so, yeah, I've been on both sides of it. But I refuse to do that anymore at all. And for a long time, I haven't.
I think
Yet,
the key though is that you have to do some self-introspection. Like
right.
there's some things that, like, so I'm, as our listeners are listening, going like, oh man, I wonder what kind of a program I should join. Like this, the last thing we want is for people to say there's no good programs out there.
Right.
The key is that you want to find the right kind of help, and the right kind of help will be with people who feel like they genuinely care about you, number one, who feel like they have the right kind of knowledge, number two, who are geared towards your overall goals of connection and congruency. At least that's what I believe most people want. Number
Who will be
three,
honest with you?
who will shoot straight, who will be honest, who aren't like desperate for you to have to like
them and
them and like all that stuff, right? And who are willing to show some self-introspection that
yeah,
way.
yeah,
And what it boils down to is you want to be working with someone who you feel demonstrates the things you're trying to learn and that you're being taught: humility, accountability,
yep.
openness, some level of transparency. And if you're
No,
getting those things, then and it's coming with the set of principles. We teach what we call the wholehearted pillars of the pillars of wholehearted living, because that's what I found to produce a happy life for
right.
me and for my clients. And but if I was sitting here teaching the 12 pillars and not doing any of the 12 pillars, you know, you it looks a little bit more gaslighty.
It is. It
Yeah.
absolutely is. It's I'm hiding behind this business or whatever I'm creating rather than like authentically working this. And Tyler, it's from my experience. I've worked in great places and I've worked in gaslighty, agenda filled places. And the truth is the culture is very different. You can sense it and you can feel it just from the way that the other clients are acting, the way the therapists are acting, or the coaches, or whomever, and you can sense it. And then you can also see people actually getting better, and not fake getting better, but actually getting better. And so yeah, the other thing too is the you know a good program will push both people to do hard things and to improve themselves and to find peace within themselves. And I think you need to be cautious of it's kind of a catch-22 dialectic. It's I will push I will push for truth, and sometimes the truth is that we got to push on one partner a lot harder than the other. Like that's the case,
Sometimes.
right? So there's that. So I'm not siding with anybody, but we're pushing for truth on one partner harder than the other, right? And but being willing to go either side of it, right? It's not just beat the betrayed into submission. I worked in a program like that where she was the codependent, she needed to change, she was the enabler, she was the right, or beat the person struggling with addiction into submission. If you're in a program like that, then two things are happening: your relationship's getting worse, and two, you're not actually doing your own work. And all the focus is just on the horrible them. And that's what needs to change.
Yeah. The horrible them part is probably a good indicator of a gaslighty type of a situation.
Yeah, because nobody's horrible.
Even though we all feel like they're horrible sometimes, at the end of the day, the pathway forward always runs back through humility and accountability.
Yeah.
And
That's
so
it.
if I'm going to treatment, just having to wait every single week in and week out, it's different than like going and being like, man, I'm really frustrated and I'm so mad at my partner, whatever this, that. Okay, that's fine. That's part of the process. But if you're going every single week and you're like, let's document how you were abused this week. You missed it. Let's document
Yeah, that's all we're talking about.
Let's figure out how you're going to stop yourself from being abused.
There you go.
Right?
There
Like
you go.
what are you
Yes.
going to do to create the life you were designed to live by God, instead of going and complaining and getting stuck just in the complaint? Now, that is a natural part of the process for some people. You need to vent once in a while, but there should always be the balancing out of the acceptance of where you're at and how you're feeling, and a push for change. And if the push for change isn't coming to you from the place that you're going, and it's always only focused the other direction, you should take a look at that.
You should take a look at it. Yep.
Yeah.
So, well, Tyler, this was a good discussion. I appreciate you hanging in there with me. I really appreciate having a brother who is in this with me. You've worked in several different programs. I mean, you and I are speaking from experience today. Like, we're not just blowing smoke here. We've been in this a long time. We know a lot of people. We've developed a lot of programs. and we're experts at this. And so I appreciate having you as my brother to be able to flush this out.
Oh, the feelings are mutual, Brandon. And, even as we're talking, I'm thinking to myself, like, this episode is going to get played 10 years from now. And we're going to look at each other and be like,
Look how unconscious we were.
Yeah, we thought we had it all figured out, and now we even know more. And I actually think it's part of the right kind of work to just acknowledge that we have come a long, long way from where we both started, and we are still far from finished products, and we're going to continue to learn and get better and improve as we go. But right now we're doing the best we can with what we've learned.
Tyler, you've arrived, but I have a long ways to go. You've arrived.
Yeah, I wish that would be in my mind. That would be the perfect world, is that I could actually come to some place of arrival. But in my recovery, what I've learned is that there's little destinations you reach where milestones, and you go, man, I like who I'm becoming. But at the end of the day, you just look up and you're like, there's still more mountain to climb.
You arrive the day you realize you'll never arrive.
Once you realize that mountain keeps going and you can still enjoy the beauty of it while you climb it, that's a good recovery.
Yep.
So,
amen. So
anyway, thanks, Brandon.
Yep. You guys, if this was helpful, please share it. If it really bothered you, some of the things we were talking about, please come on as a guest. We'd love to have these discussions with you.
Yeah, we're trying to get better.
Yeah, we want discussion, and if we're off on this, we'll listen and we'll have those discussions. So, all right, you guys have a wonderful day. We'll see you.